Nobody personified masculinity like Rock Hudson in Hollywood's golden age. His tall physique, craggy jawline, and booming voice made him America's fantasy leader. The carefully manufactured image of strength and virility hid a truth so profound and heartbreaking that even his closest friends were shocked when it emerged in his final days. Rock Hudson's last chapter, a tale of courage, betrayal, and the cost of lying in fame, is untold. Rock Hudson topped the world in 1955. Real name, Roy Harold Sherrard Jr. However, Hollywood had turned this shy Illinois truck driver's kid into a 6 feet 6 inches colossus. He ruled the silver screen with magical ease. When he entered film sets, chatter halted. American hearts melted when he smiled. The world was unaware that the man they worshipped was performing his most elaborate performance in real life. Every public appearance, interview, and posed photo with a beautiful starlet was a fake. Hudson had an unspoken deal with Hollywood's fantasy machine. He would become anything they wanted him to be for popularity, even if it meant burying his inner self so deep he forgot who he was. This change was orchestrated by his agent, Henry Wilson. Wilson specialized in manly heartthrobs and spotted something special in awkward young Roy Scherer. The name Rock Hudson wasn't random. It blended Gibraltar's power and the Hudson River's grandeur. Hudson painstakingly crafted his public presence, from his deep voice coaching to his posture training, his attire, and his personal relationships with Hollywood's most attractive women. The 1950s studio system devoured authenticity and generated fantasies, and Rock Hudson was their biggest ideal, the perfect American man who made women swoon and men desire to be him. Hudson sometimes questioned where the presentation started and the real person began because their work was so convincing. Rock Hudson's and Roy Scherer's identities were dangerously muddled. Millions of admirers wanted to be with Rock Hudson, but he was living a double life that would have wrecked his career if discovered. Hudson kept a secret that seemed like a ticking time bomb every day in an era when homosexuality was outlawed in many states. Hudson lived differently behind closed doors, away from studio bosses and gossip columnists. His genuine interactions were with males, in the shadows of a society that would have crucified him if they'd known. This deception was more than psychological. Physical, emotional, and spiritual. Everyone laughed forcefully. Every public relationship betrayed his authenticity. Hudson's closest pals were part of Hollywood's Lavender Mafia, a hidden network of gay and lesbian actors, directors, and industry professionals who risked their lives to keep each other's secrets. They met in private homes, communicated in code, and lived in fear that one slip, one photo, one angry ex-lover could ruin everything they had worked for. It was crushing irony. More successful as America's ideal guy, Hudson strayed from his truth. His romantic leads alongside Doris Day and Elizabeth Taylor were performance classics. He was pretending to like his co-stars, not to be someone different. Kisses, passionate embraces, and declarations of love cut deeper than swords. Hudson's friends later regarded him as charming and captivating in public, but more tormented in private. Constant vigilance to maintain his image was hard. Every new friendship was risk-assessed. Each party was a minefield where one false phrase could reveal everything. Hollywood welcomed Rock Hudson's 1955 marriage to Phyllis Gates, his agent assistant. Press gushed about the wedding of America's most eligible bachelor and a gorgeous, intellectual woman who had won his heart. Little did the public know that Hudson's marriage was possibly his most spectacular theater performance. Not love, but need drove the wedding. A well-coordinated plan to conceal Hudson's sexuality rumors that harmed his job. Hudson's merciless agent, Henry Wilson, planned the entire charade like a military campaign. Phyllis Gates was ideal for this deceit. Young, gorgeous, and stupid enough to think she could force the marriage. She adored Hudson and thought their relationship could be real. She understood that she was signed up to be an unsuspecting performer in a performance that would define her life. Their 3-year marriage was a masterclass in continuous deception. Hudson portrayed the loyal spouse with the same skill as his movies, but it was expensive. Gates subsequently said that their intimate life was almost non-existent. Hudson was cold and aloof, and she spent countless nights wondering what she had done wrong, never understanding it wasn't her. It was their situation's absurdity. Hidden behind married bliss, Hudson was dying. The marriage wasn't a public farce. A deserving woman was lied to. A woman he unwittingly sacrificed to save his job. The shame of this falsehood haunted him for life, complicating an already awful condition. Rock Hudson's carefully crafted world began to shatter in the early 1960s. The 1958 divorce from Phyllis Gates was nasty and unpleasant. Gates later admitted that she sensed Hudson's sexuality but was too saddened and confused to confront it. The media, always ravenous for scandal, began to probe Hudson's personal life. Hudson redoubled his efforts in career and public life. He played harder dramatic roles, wanting to demonstrate his acting range and masculinity. Giant with James Dean and Elizabeth Taylor proved his emotional range, but he had to play heterosexual romance with even more sincerity. Stress was evident. Friends during this time remembered Hudson as more introverted and depressed. Keeping his double life was physically and mentally exhausting. He started drinking more and arrived on set with the telltale indications of a man numbing the ache of lying. The changing social landscape made issues worse. Sexuality became more open in the 1960s. Ironically, this made Hudson's position worse. Hudson had more to lose as society openly discussed homosexuality, raising the stakes for disclosure. He saw other actors' careers destroyed by merely the whiff of scandal, and he knew his secret could burst at any time. Deception was heartbreaking. Every interview posed a risk. Every new professional and personal interaction was risk assessed. Hudson lived in a cage of his own construction, surrounded by luxury and adoration, yet alone with his truth. In the late 1970s, Rock Hudson was in his 50s. Something unexpected happened. He fell deeply in love. Mark Christian, a beautiful 30-year-old Los Angeles actor and model, was his crush. Hudson may have experienced true passionate love for the first time in his adult life without the pretenses that had defined all his previous relationships. Mark Christian was young, attractive, and unafraid of their age difference. Everything Hudson had never wanted openly. Christian offered Hudson freedom he had lacked for decades. Hudson could be himself in their private Mekon, omens away from Hollywood. He could love without performing, laugh without knowing the impact, and be Roy Scherer instead of Rock Hudson. Even this relationship was hampered by Hudson's public duties. When they appeared publicly, Christian had to be introduced as Hudson's secretary or helper. Their love had to be in Hudson's adulthood shadows. Heartbreaking irony. When Hudson finally felt love, he couldn't show it. Its emotional genuineness set this connection apart. In contrast to his performance marriage to Phyllis Gates, his bond with Christian was genuine. Hudson's buddies observed his transformation. He seemed lighter and happier than in years. Hudson appeared to have balanced his civic duties with his personal happiness for a moment. Who knew that this love story would set the stage for Hudson's most astonishing revelation? A truth that would shock even his closest friends in his final days. Rock Hudson lived in Hollywood's underground gay world, a sophisticated, covert network of actors, directors, producers, and other industry professionals who fiercely guarded each other's secrets. A shadow realm has its own regulations, gathering areas, and unspoken codes of conduct. The community consisted of private parties and carefully selected Hollywood Hills homes, discreet clubs that operated with the understanding that certain activities would never be discussed outside their walls, and a network of trusted friends who were confidants and protectors. Hudson's reputation made him a valued member of this underground society and a source of security concerns. They were more than social events. They saved men and women living double lives in one of the world's most scrutinized businesses. Hudson could finally relax, laugh, and talk to romantic partners during these intimate events. He could be himself for a few hours instead of his carefully manufactured public presence. The clandestine friendships Hudson made were deeper and more profound than his public ones. These folks accepted his truth fully. They knew his struggles, sacrifices, and continual vigilance to keep his secret. They freed him from performance. Hudson was relatively isolated in this protected community. His fame made him unique. His exposure would have shook the industry. Hudson was nearly overprotected by the community because his demise may drag down many others. Despite its good intentions, this protection isolated Hudson. Despite acceptance, he was often alone. American culture changed drastically in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and Hahn saw these changes most in sexuality. The homosexual rights movement grew. San Francisco and New York become LGBTQ+ havens. For the first time in American history, the media openly covered homosexuality. These shifts made Rock Hudson feel hopeful and scared. The growing acceptance of homosexuality in some circles suggested he might be able to live freely someday. His entire career was built on a foundation that would collapse if his secret was disclosed, and the stakes had never been higher. Hudson observed younger performers and public personalities coming out. Some stay in the spotlight, others fade. Each case was examined to determine if the public was ready for Rock Hudson, the ultimate male icon, to come out as gay. However, the risks seemed too great every time he pondered it. It was crushing irony. Hudson entered his 50s and 60s with a lifetime of carefully prepared lies to uphold while society accepted homosexuality. Coming out wouldn't only reveal his current truth. It would entail admitting his entire public persona was a lie. It would mean admitting that his marriage to Phyllis Gates was a fraud, that innumerable interviews were lies, and that the guy America had adored for decades was very different. Hudson's old acquaintances later portrayed him as a guy caught between periods, too elderly and engaged in his lie to welcome the new openness, but young enough to understand the sorrow of continuous concealment. Like a prisoner whose cell door was unlocked, but who could? He didn't walk through it. In the early 1980s, Rock Hudson's acquaintances noticed small changes in his appearance and conduct. Someone who had always been healthy and active looked to be losing weight. Those closest to him noticed his legendary enthusiasm waning and his fatigue increasing. These alterations were initially attributed to aging. Remember, Hudson was in his late 50s. A more worrisome trend emerged gradually. Hudson was fully aware of the problem. The man who made his profession on physical perfection was scared by his body's betrayal. Trying to figure out his weariness, weight loss, and other puzzling symptoms, he saw doctor after doctor. Each medical consultation was confidential. Hudson couldn't afford Hollywood health rumors. Hudson's understanding of troubling LGBT community stories made the issue worse. Gay males in San Francisco and New York were suffering from a mystery sickness. Name, cause, and cure were unknown for the condition. Healthy young men were dying from what appeared to be a full immune system collapse, confusing doctors and panicking the LGBT community. Dr. Rex Kinnemer, Hudson's private doctor, performed more advanced tests but found nothing. They revealed disturbing information. Hudson had trouble fighting mild infections due to a compromised immune system. This unknown new ailment haunted every consultation, silent but terrible. For a man who had spent his career controlling his image, shus, and body, losing control was terrible. Hudson stopped going out and avoided friends. A new, more scarier secret joined his decades-old one. He could have been terribly unwell with something the medical community didn't grasp. Rock Hudson was diagnosed on June 5, 1984, in a Los Angeles private hospital, turning his final years into a race against time and exposure. One of the few doctors who understood the enigmatic new ailment, Dr. Michael Gottlieb, presented the news clinically. Hudson had AIDS. Words hit Hudson like a punch. AIDS was mostly unknown in 1984. What was known was terrible. It appeared fatal to everybody. It was spreading swiftly in the gay community and bore such a strong stigma that public figures were socially dead after diagnosis. AIDS was more than a medical disaster for Rock Hudson, America's manly ideal. It might destroy his life's effort. Hudson was initially quite secretive. Dr. Gottlieb and Hudson's personal doctor, Dr. Rex Kinnemer, swore to secrecy. Hudson knew that AIDS was so strongly linked to homosexuality that his diagnosis would out him, not just because of his work. He would lose his 40-year secret to a virus. The medical reality was harsh. There were no viable AIDS medicines in 1984. Not approved for years. AZT killed most patients within 2 years after diagnosis. Hudson had to confront the end of his career and his life while keeping his performance. What exacerbated the situation?